What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. My name is Stephen Turnbull, founder of T5 Insurance Services in Clinton, New York, joined by my co-host, the one and only, hold your applause, Mr. Sean Fitzgerald, founder of LAF Advisors in Long Island, New York. Ladies and gentlemen, we got an exciting show today, Big 5-0. So everybody told us when we started this, Sean, you got to do at least 50 episodes. So this is the last one. Here we go. We made it. I'm just playing. What do you think, Sean? 50 episodes. It's pretty crazy.
So just stop here. Let's just,
right?
50 is an accomplishment. No, and we did 50 consistently, one a week. So we're almost at that year mark.
Yeah, I was looking back, doing a little bit of research on our guest today. You got to dig deep because I hear he's prospecting in New York, but we'll have to get into that. But I was doing a little research, and second time guest on the podcast today, and that was episode number 5 is when he joined us the first time, and that was 9 months ago. So we've pounded those out in under a year. It's been an exciting journey. What's going on at LAF? Anything new and exciting?
Yeah, a bunch of stuff, man, like always. But just something I wanted to touch on. You know, wife and I going through a hard time with the new baby, but I say that to say, like, my wife and I had a conversation. We're like, you know, when times get rough and things are hard, at the end of the day, let's just remember like how grateful we actually are to have 2 healthy babies, to have strong family support. You know what I mean? To have a roof over our head. So I just wanted to share that message. It's just like, just be grateful for what you have, you know, and that'll help you get through a lot of the.
How many times have you looked at Jocko's good video in the last couple months?
Too many times to say out loud.
I think the 3 of us on this screen, that's probably every day that video gets sent out. But let's get into our guest today, ladies and gentlemen. Super excited to have back second time guest on the Scratch Agency podcast, Mr. Taylor Garcia himself, Vice President of Jackson & Jackson Insurance from Glendora, California. And this was actually the first guest, Taylor, that I was able to just rattle that off with any notes. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. Thank you guys again for having me. This has been awesome.
Oh, it's the big 5-0. We had to roll out the red carpet. So for maybe the people who haven't seen episode 5 yet, give just the quick summary of who Taylor is, and then we'll get into the stuff we want to talk about today.
Yeah. We have a family agency here in town. I'm not a scratch agent like most of your guests. But we have a family agency here in Glendora, California. Agency's been around about 90 years. My in-laws run the agency. Well, let me rephrase that. They are starting to retire. So I am kind of taking the ship and steering the ship in a new direction and kind of handling the agency at this point. And we're just trying to get it into the modern century and kind of shifting things. So yeah, that's kind of, we do commercial, personal, we kind of do it all. But yeah, that's in a nutshell, our agency.
Yeah. I hear the state of the property market is great over there in California right now.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
So many options.
Yeah, it's brutal out here, but you know, story of California.
I want to just side note for a minute on how cool this is, because I think when Taylor was on 9 months ago, Sean, was when we were just getting to know each other, and then we were really just getting to know Taylor, and the 3 of us have morphed a really cool friendship, and I think we talk who knows how many times a day. Sean and I are early risers at about 4:30, so we're blowing up the group message, which is 1:30 Taylor's time. So Taylor hasn't slept in 9 months. But next week, we're going to very much miss Sean being with us at IAOA, but Taylor and I will meet for the first time in person, which is kind of crazy. So I was joking with him, I hope he actually likes me in person, because we've morphed a great friendship remotely so far. But I wanted to touch on that for Scratch Agents, like find a circle. And I'm just so thankful to have you two inside of that circle as we're going through this journey. Taylor, one of the things that I think I want to dive into today is turning that ship around, like you said. And the reason I think it's going to be so beneficial to our listeners is because there's so many similarities with turning the ship around of an older agency versus starting a scratch agency from the bottom, right? And I know that because my past life, I was trying to turn the ship around in different things and do exactly what you're trying to do. So I think there's a lot of value the listeners can get today from learning about your story and what you're trying to do. So tell us kind of what's going on over there and how that's all coming to be, and then we can dive in a little deeper into it.
Yeah. Um, it definitely, a lot of people think I've talked to a lot of agents and they think, man, like you have it easy because you're kind of taking on something that's already been created. And like some people kind of look at me in a different, like the ones that have started scratch, they're like, oh man, you haven't gone through those like beginning years of like suffering or like struggling. And which they are not, they are right there. But at the same time, shifting a 90-year-old agency that's been around and stuck in their ways for so long, it's its own struggle, if not, in its own way. So yeah, so here at our agency, like I said, we've been around almost 90 years. We have kind of adapted a little bit over the years, but really kind of what I'm doing now is because my in-laws are starting to retire, we're phasing out as I take over. I'm kind of trying to steer the ship in a different direction, not necessarily completely different, but in a more modernized, maybe a little more strategic direction. And what I'm finding is it's really hard to train old dogs new tricks. And you got to have the patience and you have to have, just the ongoing of just reminding people and pushing. And it's a struggle. And so that's kind of what I've been doing a lot recently is just, updating some. I'm not trying to add a ton of technology into our agency. That's not something that I'm pushing, but like we did update some stuff and that was a struggle. And then, Sean and I have kind of talked about going into like niches and like kind of honing in because we're a generalist agency. And so that's something that I'm trying to kind of not necessarily be that everything to everyone. And so that's a huge hurdle to tackle because everybody here is just that's what we are. And so to change that mindset and to change that culture, it could be pretty challenging, Um, and so, oh, sorry, my phone was ringing. Should have turned that off. My apologies. But yeah, so it's really honestly, like I was thinking about this last night as I was walking my dog. I was like, you have to have as much as it's there are luxuries to it, right? Because we have the revenue coming in and we have maybe a budget for certain things that scratch agencies don't have. But the things that I struggle with is more of just like the change of the culture, the change of the processes, the procedures, and just kind of the whole thing. And so as I go along with that, I'm no expert in this. I'm kind of learning as I go. But it's been a fun, wild ride so far.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting because it's like you and I talk, and I'm like, "Hey, I just did a hiring playbook, this playbook, that playbook, this playbook," and you're just, how are you gonna tell your team, if you have all of those things? Like, I would imagine you just overwhelm them at some point. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's got to be like
Totally.
strategy there as far as like when you want to roll out a new process and procedure. I mean, I would think, I don't know what the right
Yeah,
answer
because
to that is.
we have a team of there's 11 of us total. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that luxury to just be like, hey, I want to switch this software, or switch this
Yeah.
thing, and I'm just going to do it. I don't have that luxury because if I do that too many times, then the team's like, dude, come on, make up your mind. And so I am starting to be a little more intentional and very careful with what we change. Even like our CRM that we're building out, it's like I paid for this thing for like 4 or 5 months before I even introduced it to my team because I wanted to make sure it was set up properly and that they weren't like the guinea pigs, because then they can kind of get overwhelmed with the work they already have, plus trying to learn this and I'm trying to teach them.
Yeah.
It could be a lot,
TG, talk about, I mean, if you feel comfortable talking about it, talk about the paper, like how much paper was involved in your agency.
Here he goes.
And how much you guys saved. I mean, if you don't mind discussing that, I
absolutely.
think it would just be a good thing a good story to share.
Yeah, so that was another thing that was a really hard thing to change culture-wise, and like how their mindset was, because so we have some fairly large commercial accounts that require a lot of certs. And in the past, when I started, our thing was we did like, this is just an example of the paper we'd use, but when I got started, I didn't know any better, and we'd do these cert parties, and we would print out 10,000 pages, and we'd be stapling stuffing envelopes, licking postage, and we'd mail out 5,000 certs twice a year for this one account. That's only one account. So all of a sudden we're just using so much paper, and every person had a printer on their desk, and everybody was printing to fill it out, to scan it back in. And so I started to look at all the paper we were ordering, and the stationery and the envelopes and the everything. And last year, I was talking to you guys about it. You're like, God, you use so much paper, So I started to do the math and I started to research how much we were ordering. And last year, I mean, from 2021 to 2022, I think we spent close to $40,000 in paper, envelopes, letterhead, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Stationery, postage, because we had a little postage machine. That alone was like 15 grand. And so yeah, so I was like, okay, this is something we got to change now. And even my in-laws, when I showed them like the breakdown, they didn't even really honestly realize how much, as we were just ordering it, it was just little bits here and there. But
yeah,
when you look at the bottom line, they were like, holy crap. So we ended up, I took away printers from everyone's desk. We have one larger one that's the ink's cheaper, and like if they need to print, they can. But I'm really trying to, I tell the team all the time, and they always joke with me because they hate it, because I walk around and I'm like, who printed this? Why did you need to print this? And they're like, oh, I just needed to check some, whatever it is. But yeah, so I've been really pushing that, because that was a huge expense, and it was causing friction with our clients, because we were having them, we're having them print stuff, or we're still mailing them things, and they're like, we don't need the mail, like please stop mailing us stuff. So yeah, that was a big change.
Well, here's what I think is interesting about this conversation, and you and I talk a lot all the time, because you're doing what I was trying to do, right? Which is why T5 is what T5 is. But talk about the success you have with introducing these new things to a team. And I think there's people that, if you're acquiring a new agency or something like that, if you're scratch and acquire a new agency, these are things you can relate to. But what I found when I tried to do that was the success of saying, we're incorporating this new process, we're incorporating this new tool. And the reason is, this is what it does to benefit you. Right? It's not Taylor just saying, I want to be all tech and no paper and let's throw the paper out. This is what it's going to benefit your day-to-day. This is how it's going to benefit your job. This is how it's going to make your life easier. And that's how, really, the way that you have to present it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the whole cert party thing, our team didn't like that. Nobody wanted to spend their whole day helping stuff envelopes. And so just the fact that I was able to get that changed, it was like, I presented it in a way of, hey, we no longer have to be sitting around stapling paper. Like, this is going to make things easier. We could click a button, it'll email out certs. And then so many other things, right? Like, we don't have to mail out policies. You can email them. And you're right. It was a very fine line of me kind of going around going, no, I'm just, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing that. But you're right. I did have to explain it in a way, like even the whole fact of like DocuSign, right? It was like, look, like this isn't for just because I want you to use DocuSign. This is going to make your life easier, because we don't have to mail out an application for them to fill out and sign back. It's going to make the sales process faster. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. And I still don't get me wrong, I still get pushed back on a lot of it. But I do my best to present it in a way that's, a lot of this is just to make things more efficient. Like our CRM, that's a huge new thing. And, that wasn't me just because I want to track the sales guys' pipelines. Yes, that's part of it. But the way I pitched it was, this is going to help you keep track of all the prospects that you've worked on, and you can pull your own report showing what you've sold this month or this year, and you can track your own sales. Mm-hmm. And I tried to push it as, this is going to help you. Yes, it's going to help me and the agency track what our producers are doing, but in the end, like when I'm showing it to them, I'm like, no, this is for you guys, so you guys can track who you've worked on, a place you can store your maybe old prospects, etc. Because prior, we just never had that. So those kind of things that I'm making those changes, I have to try to push it in a way. It's like, this is here to benefit you, not just because I want that for the agency. So yeah, it's a tough, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know what I mean? I get pushed back on certain things because it's a new thing that we got to learn, or a new process that we got to change. But so far, so good.
I win. Okay. For anybody watching and you or listening, Sean and I just had rock, paper, scissors. Who was next? Taylor. Talk about the change in Taylor of morphing into a leader versus the son of the boss.
Ooh.
Yeah. Ooh. Let's get into that. I want to be. Okay. And here's the reason. I'm thinking from a scratch agent standpoint. of being a one-man show and hiring that first support staff or hiring that first producer. And I know Sean and I talked a little bit about this, and Sean, you were saying, hey, I had the realization now that these decisions have to be with me and my producer. You know, these decisions. So
Yep.
when we talked a little bit there about getting the team buy-in and all of that, but talk about some of the struggles and open up about like going from the son of the boss to now Taylor's the one making these decisions. Taylor's the one you come to with these questions or whatever that is.
Yeah. It was a little bit hard, I'm not gonna lie, because well, everyone in our office basically is older than me. So it was one of those struggles even in the very beginning. And I think when I first got hired, there was this kind of intention when I got hired to maybe I would be in the position I'm in now when I got hired. But I didn't know anything. And so when I got hired, I remember we just having a lot of conversations with my father-in-law, like, you have to work the hardest. Everyone's looking at you thinking you got a free handout. And so you need to show and earn their respect. And so that was something that was kind of drilled into me early on, which I appreciated because I was the first one there in the office. I was the last to leave throughout the years prior to being a leader, right? So I put in 5-6 years of just hard work, putting my head down, selling, and so on, without any kind of like, hey, I'm the boss, the son-in-law. Now I got this leadership role, and I was just handed it, and everyone's kind of like, oh gosh, look at this joke. So I really wanted to come into this very intentionally. And then when they put me and they promoted me as vice president, at that point, because I was putting in a lot of work, I felt like the team kind of like naturally were like, oh yeah, this makes sense, and there were a few that were like, and there's still times like instead of maybe they don't ask me a question, they ask Clark. And what's great about Clark is he's always like, go ask Taylor. I don't know. So he's like, why aren't you asking him? And so he kind of now reinforces it, but it is always a thing where I'm constantly having to like earn that role. And I don't take that for granted because I'm married in, and that in the very beginning, it was tough. And I'm still trying to always like serve them, and I'm trying to earn their respect and and show them that I can be this position. And when my in-laws were going to retire, we had that conversation. I kind of pulled the team members aside and I was talking to them about it, and everybody was on board. They were like, this is great. We knew this was going to happen, and so we kind of had this conversation. But I think the biggest thing and the struggles were that you have to earn it. And so I just never wanted that person where they look at me like, oh, you just got it because you're married in. You know what I mean?
Okay,
And
so let's go deeper here. So
sure.
how, because I think this just applies to leadership in general.
Yeah.
How do you think you're earning it? Past being the first one there and the last one out. How do you think Taylor's earning it?
Um, I'm just here to try to help them in any way I can. And I think one of the things I've been trying to do a lot of is just listening to them, pulling them aside. Hey, what's going on in your role? And recently we lost a few of our service reps. So I was that service rep, right? So I was kind of put back
In the
back when
trenches.
all of a sudden I was like, oh, like I haven't done that in a while. So like I realized how much work that was, and that kind of put it into perspective for me. And so what I'm doing now is I'm really like pulling each one aside and I'm just talking to them. Hey, what's going on with your seat? Is there anything else we can improve? And I'm constantly like just talking to them. I'm pouring into them more and just figuring out how I can better their job or their role or their everything else,
Love that.
personally, etc. Like we've had a few that have had family members pass away. I'm pouring into them how I can help them. I'm covering her desk. Like there's things like that where I'm just trying to do that. I know without me doing that, everybody would kind of feel like, nobody really cares here. So I'm trying to constantly just talk to them and listen to them. And I think just doing that alone has really helped. Just
That's a
making them feel heard,
Yeah, I honestly didn't expect you to go there, but I love that. I think that's probably the best thing you can do is just listen to them. When I don't know why, but first thing that pops to mind when I think of leader, listening should definitely be at the top. Maybe I got to reinforce that in myself. But one thing that comes to mind is vision. And I think you didn't say it, but I think you're doing a good job of it, especially with the niche, right? So, and what I mean by that is this is the vision you have, and then you're helping your producer or your team member see a clearer path for their future. And I think you're doing a really good job of that with building out the niche, which we're both working on. So why don't you go into the niche stuff a little bit?
Well, I just want to say one more thing.
Oh,
I just
sure.
one more comment on that. One thing that I think he does really well is you're a teammate. You're not the boss,
Yeah.
right? And like you said, like relatability, like here, like how are you doing? Like what can we do here to make your job easier? What can we do to achieve these goals together as a team? Like, I mean that in my opinion is the biggest thing possible. Like become relatable, get down to their level, right? And like we're here for you to achieve X, Y, and Z. And then that's how you get the right people in the right seats on the bus, which we'll have to get into that, and the right people rowing in the right direction. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that. I just wanted to make that point.
No, I wanted to add one thing too. So yesterday, and this is just going based off of, you know, the listening thing we were talking about. Yesterday, my producer called me a few times during the middle of the day, which is fine. We talk during the day all the time, but he's remote. So, you know, I just had one of those crazy schedules, and I felt like I was short with him a couple of times, not like in a mean way, just like I was rushing, right? And at the end of the day, I went for my walk and I had some clarity, and I was like, you know what, I got to call Ryan and just like have a conversation with him. And I just called him and apologized, said, listen, I'm sorry if I was short a few times. I just wanted to let you know kind of what was going on, and if you had any feedback or wanted to talk about anything more in depth. And we had like an awesome 45-minute conversation, and it went really well. You know, he felt better, I felt better. So I think, listen, no one's perfect, right? But when I feel like as a leader, when you see yourself falling off the track a little, so to speak, you know, kind of do some of those things that'll help keep you on track, you know?
All it comes down to is communication.
Yeah, I agree.
A big part
All
of
it comes down. Imagine how much he appreciated you calling and being like, "Hey, sorry I was short," rather than you were short with him, never talked about it, and then he's going home being like, "Yeah, my boss was an asshole today." Like,
exactly.
It's just communication.
Totally.
That's all it comes down to.
Definitely. And that's something that, and that was always that way, even when my in-laws were running it. Like Clark always went around, always talked to everyone. I always heard him. He said, my thing was, I said good morning to every single person, and I asked about him. Hey, how was your daughter's recital? How was this? How was that? And every conversation I heard him, because he would make his rounds around each person every morning, and he'd be like, hey, Lori, how is your husband? I know he had that surgery or whatever it was, right? And I could just tell that they always appreciated those kind of conversations, even if it was just that little small talk in the morning, you know. And even when we got into our new office and they gave me the corner office and Clark passed down his desk, it's this giant executive desk, I felt a little like it's uncomfortable to me because I don't want to be portrayed in this way of, hey, you got this you're the CEO or whatever it is, right?
You're on your throne, Taylor.
Yeah, like I would rather have a tiny desk in with the rest of the team. Like I would rather have that than like this. I mean, it's very nice and I don't take it for granted, but it's just one of those things. It's like I don't see myself as this big like CEO in this huge desk, and everyone's kind of afraid to come to me. So I'm always like, I'm not at my desk. I'm usually out in the area with all the cubicles, like talking to them all. Hey, what's going on? How can I help? You know, what are you working on today? So that's just one of the things too. Like I was saying, it's just being a team member with them and not feeling like I'm just like sitting here like barking orders. You know.
Yeah.
One more thing, and then I know we want to get into the niche.
Sure.
All of that leadership discussion we had, I would say, and I don't know, what do you think? It's been a year and a half, 2 years really of you kind of taking over and being that leader. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
But, okay, so over that time frame, what's been your biggest mistake, and what did you learn from that?
Having hard conversations. I think that was my biggest mistake. I avoided them at all cost. Even though I knew there were certain situations where I needed to maybe pull that person aside and say, hey, we can't be doing that, or you shouldn't be saying this, or, you know, we need to kind of focus your efforts elsewhere. I kind of, because I'm still in I'm still in the journey of being a leader. So like, as you're listening to this, I'm no leader expert. Like I'm listening to the ones who have been doing this a lot longer. And so I'm trying to learn where I can. But I think the one thing that I've struggled with is those hard conversations, is just pulling them aside, pulling them in your office saying, hey, we shouldn't be doing that. You know, because in office, sometimes people talk and things get out of hand or whatever. And I know it happened, but I'm like, I'm going to let that slide. But I think if I let too many of those slide, and then it becomes bad. So I think one thing I've pushed in the last 2 years is just nipping those kind of conversations in the butt, doing it early on, and just having them and pulling them, and that's the thing. I've had to fire 2 people now since of the last 2 years of being a leader. That was hard. So it's kind of forced me to have those kind of conversations, not in a bad way, but unfortunately somebody's got to have those conversations with the team, right? And that's one area that I'm still like, trying to get better at. I come in the morning knowing I have to have one of those with a big pit in my stomach, like, oh gosh, this is going to be uncomfortable. But that's one area that I'm, I wish I would have kind of started earlier.
So
yes,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stephen, didn't we? I don't know if it was in our Telegram or we had that conversation somewhere where someone said they were nervous about something, and I forgot if it was me or you that responded, and we basically said it's good you're nervous. I mean, that means you're passionate about, what you got going on. So if you weren't nervous, there'd be a problem,
Yeah,
so
true.
And I think with all those situations too, you look back at it once it's done and was like, oh, that wasn't that bad, right? Or that's
right.
90% of the time.
That only took 5 minutes, and I was worried about it for the last 5 months, right? I
Exactly.
mean, you just have to do it, and that goes back to like cracking your big nut the first thing in the morning. Get that first thing done that you don't want to do, and makes it the rest of it easy. We can go down that wormhole.
Sure.
Let's since I think this will provide so much value, let's get into the niche stuff, Taylor. And I want you to position it into why you decided to go this route for the agency. And then just a personal question, why New York? What's so special about New York?
So let me get started. So as I got started in the industry, in the agency, I'll get to New York in a minute.
Yeah, please. The listeners are waiting for you to get to New York. I'd like to.
Gosh. We were always the generalist. And when I got hired, it was sell anything you can to everyone you can. And it was just, that's what we did. And I realized very quickly, because I'm no like cold-blooded killer, cold collar salesman, I had to find my own way to get business. And the way I got business was marketing online. And I quickly found that I couldn't market to everyone for everything. I didn't have an audience. I didn't know who my listeners were. And so when I made videos, it was really hard for me to talk to everyone about, so I would always kind of struggle with making videos on, or marketing pieces or blogs or whatever it was, about 50 different topics about every kind of clientele we had, because we had anything from restaurants to bakeries to garages to contractors to everything. So they were all such different personalities that I was like, I can't market efficiently to all of these people. And I think I quickly found that, where it's just like, this isn't working. I can't be everything to everyone, because I'm talking to nobody at this point. Like it's not relating to anyone, because I'm just spitting out random generic wording, right? And so I and we've always just done that. Now, keep in mind, our agency never really did marketing in this fashion. So we were always just the cold callers or the community guy, just writing kind of whatever's in the town, which works, right? It just wasn't working for me that way, because I wasn't that way. So I was like, if I'm on social media and I'm on YouTube and I'm doing these things, I need to have an audience. And that's and I've kind of always struggled with it. In the last 10 years, I kind of always struggled with it. But then recently, I kind of dove deeper into like auto garages, because we had quite a few. We had some really good programs for it. And I was like, this is an area that I kind of know about. I have family that are in the industry. Let's kind of go in full force. And once I started, marketing was much easier. My content was way more intentional. I knew exactly who I was talking to. I knew exactly who I needed to talk to. And all of a sudden, I kid you not, 6 months in, it was like a lead every other day. And Sean and Steven, I remember sending him a text like, dude, I got 4 that last night while I was sleeping. They're like, what the heck, man? And like, I don't know, but it just like connected, I guess. And it just started working. And I don't say I'm the expert in it. It just, I think I got lucky. But it's just kind of working, because I have really just started kind of diving deeper into it like hard now,
I think what is super interesting about this conversation, and it's something Stephen and I have talked a lot about, is, talking with people who are in a more experienced, better place than us from a business standpoint, right? So we spoke to Brett Young, we spoke to Dave Jackson, James Jenkins, Cameron at Valley Trucking, you,
Sure.
Taylor, and we start to notice a trend. All of these people say the same thing. If I could do it all over again, I would niche down.
Yeah.
And we just started noticing a pattern from honestly just doing the podcast and talking to all these people. And I think the Brett Young episode stood out to me the most when he mentioned how much easier it is to scale when you're focused on a singular line of business.
Yeah.
Right. And then Taylor, you and I started diving deep into, the training and the processes and procedures around that. So, you said being a generalist, right? So I start thinking of my agency and I'm like, oh man, I'm not really a generalist. I specialize with home and auto and contractors and restaurants. Those are like my 4 things.
Yeah.
But if you look at restaurants, there's 30 different types of restaurants. Is it just a bar? Is it a fast food place? Is it a family style restaurant? Is it fine dining? Contractors, 100 different types of contractors. And guess what?
Yeah.
For every one of those contractors, for every one of those different types of restaurants, you have to ask different questions. You have to approach different carriers. The process and procedures are completely different. So your scale goes completely out the window. Because how are you going to train? How are you going to train somebody to learn all of those things? It's not easy. So when you and I were talking about that, Taylor, that was just like a light bulb moment. I mean, that went on, and I was just like, I need to niche. And then the coolest thing about it, which I don't think you touched on, is how then we can paint a clearer picture for our team member to get our team members excited about attacking a niche and taking over market share in that specific niche. So I just feel like you have the training aspect makes it easier. The process procedure makes it easier. The scaling makes it easier. And then, like you said, being able to market to that specific niche, it makes it easier from a content standpoint. What content you're going to create to attract that niche, what platforms to be on. You can be a lot more intentional with all your tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And the training thing is and I didn't touch on that, and I wish I did, because that is the hardest thing. Like, we just hired a new commercial account manager, and he's great. He had experience in the past, so I didn't have to go from basics. However, when he got here, I realized quickly, I was like, oh, well, I had to give him our 10 wholesalers we use and all of these carrier logins and all of this stuff. And I started to think, as I started to train and I'm like going through this stuff with him, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. And he's like, oh, well, this underwriter for this, and then there's this for this, and then there's this for this. And I still haven't shown him everything. Yeah. And it's like, how easy would it be to bring someone on? Say, if I had an account manager only for the garages, it could be like, hey, here's our 4 carriers. Here's the 3 apps we need. Here's exactly the list of questions we ask. And boom. I mean, the training is night and day. It looks completely different than just like, hey, here's everything to everyone. We got 50 companies and 50 wholesalers and a million applications. And, it's impossible to show everyone that.
I think, thinking back to when I started in insurance, a great lesson I got, but also I think maybe I took it too far to the extreme, was don't have all your eggs in one basket. That was something I heard constantly. Don't write just apartment buildings, because, Nationwide used to write them all the time, and then they non-renewed the whole apartment book. And then I was scrambling to try to replace the business.
Yeah.
So I'm not recommending just write one line of business only, but narrow it down a little bit, I think there's a good side of having it a little diversified, but there should be that one major focus,
I agree, because we have another agent in our office that has a very narrow niche, and he's these Eagles lodges. They're like a retired place for vets to go to have drinks and stuff, and they give back to the community, and they donate police dogs. They do a lot of good stuff for the community, but they're very small little dive bar almost places, and that's all he did. only these Eagles lodges, and he rides like 400 of them around the country, and he was doing very well, and he had it dialed in. And I remember looking at him like jealous, because I'm like, you got one app, you know exactly what to ask. They're all now coming to you because you're the guy. And you know, the only thing, like you said, if you put all your eggs in one basket, like what he's struggling with is like carriers are pulling out because the liquor claims, and so he's struggling to find markets for it. Now, if there's really no carriers for it, then he kind of is SOL, right? So you want to make sure, like you're saying, maybe not put it all in one basket, but diversify a little bit. But if you could maybe have 2 or 3 industries that maybe you're really good at or something like that, so at least if one fizzles out or something. Now with the automotive space that I'm going after, there is a lot of like micro niches within it, but But yeah, I think that you're right. And that was the one thing I was always told. Don't put your eggs in one basket. So when I was going to go after niche, my whole agency, everyone that worked here was like, I wouldn't do it. Just write as much as you can. And they kind of pushed off the whole niche thing. And you, like you're saying, if I were to go back, that's what 100% I would have done. Because imagine focusing on the one in industry for 10 years, I would have been like the guy, you know?
Exactly. Or just saying, hey, I'm going to do garages and home and auto insurance, and that's it. Anything else that comes across my desk, I'm going to pass to my team members or whatever the case is, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to get repetitive from episode 5, so I highly suggest everybody go back in episode 5. We talked very specifically about video marketing and all that, but I would argue, Taylor, that at least within the industry, you have one of the best content platforms as far as the content you put together, the different topics you talk about, all of those things. And I want you to give the listeners advice for starting video, and I don't want the answer to be consistent, just pick up the phone and do it. You know, something past what they always hear, because something that I think is super unique about your content is it's like, man, that's such a good topic. Like, where did he come up with that? Like, you know, and I think past the I'm nervous, I don't have the commitment, and those other objections that we hear about people starting video, something else is like, well, I am going to talk about, like you said, I'm in my auto garages. How many times can I talk about things with auto garages before it dries up or different things like that? But I feel like you do such a good job at uniquely spinning different things. So talk to us about the creative side, past picking up the phone and doing it, and all of those things of how you found success with your content.
Yeah. I think what really helped me was I have this notepad, and don't hit me because it's paper, but I have this notepad. I have this notepad next to me, and literally anytime I'm on a call with a client or whatever it is, it'll spark something in my head. So like yesterday I was working with a garage, and they were like, oh yeah, I was getting non-renewed because on my sign it says I do auto sales, but I don't really do auto sales. I'm more of just a repair shop. So I'm like, boom, there's a concept idea. Hey, garage owners, don't advertise services that you don't actually do, because that can hurt you. And so anytime I'm talking to someone and I hear something like that, it just, I don't know, for me, it just triggers in my head. I'm like, oh, that's a perfect topic. So I have this list of stuff like, you know, hey, like I'll get a call, what is the difference between this versus this? And I'm like, boom, there's a perfect idea. And so I don't, aside from all the generic stuff, to just do it, that's kind of what I did. And I just realized, like, I'm going to let that content work for me while I'm not working, and I'll do consistent stuff throughout the day. But then when I get home, like, that's still up, and I still get messages and I still get stuff. And so really when I come up with videos, yes, there's times like I'll spend in 30 minutes just coming up with ideas, right? And I'll intentionally schedule the time to do that. But it normally doesn't work out as well. It's usually the off the cuff as I'm working. I'll be like, oh, that was a great, man, you know. And I tend to do some more generic talk with like Jackson stuff. That's when I'll go to the team and I'll just ask May, who does personal lines, like, hey, what are the most common questions you're getting right now? Well, it's talking about the market we're in and why the rates are higher, or why we have no carriers, or why they're pulling out. I'm like, okay, cool. So I can jot some of those down. That's how I'm coming up with my content ideas, is just from the conversations I'm having. And it's real life stuff that I know not this one person is asking, or not this one person has done. Like I see many garages advertise services that they don't actually do. They're like, yeah, what we can. And I'm like, yeah, but don't, because the insurance company's going to see that on your website or something. And so just conversations like that I know other people can relate with. That's just kind of how I'm coming up with it. And so far it's been resonating fairly well. It's just basically doing like a frequently asked questions type of style,
And hey, ChatGPT,
yes,
create me, 10 pieces of engaging content for social media.
Totally.
For my garage audience or whatever the case is.
Exactly. And they'll give you a list of generic ideas and you can branch off that 100%. So yeah, that's kind of, and I appreciate you saying that, Stephen, because I've been working really hard on the whole video thing for the last 5-6 years of doing this. And I just started doing like my own individual stuff, documenting my journey, which is not necessarily like insurance content, but it kind of is. And it's just been really fun because it's holding me accountable to being better, because I want to know next week, I want to talk about something that I achieved versus just the same old thing that I'm doing. So it's pushing me to do more,
Yeah, and that's what Talk with Taylor on YouTube. Make sure you pitch that.
Yeah. I started that as Talk with Taylor. Basically, I'm just documenting my journey of becoming a business owner, the agency owner, what my struggles are now, where I'm seeing success. I haven't had any guests on or anything like that yet. I am probably in the near future, but yeah, and it's just pushing me to kind of do better so I can have more things to document. So then maybe my kids or my grandkids go back and be like, dude, when you were 30, Dad, look at you. You were, on this little couch in your tiny office. I don't know. But yeah.
I love that. Hey, look, as we look to wrap this up, we usually have the same question of what you would do if you had to start over. I think we kind of answered that throughout the whole episode. So I want to change up and have just a brief conversation with the three of us. Okay. Sean is currently reading my favorite book, The Energy Bus.
So good.
Let's talk about it for just a few minutes because I got a little stinger at the end I want to add in.
So
Sean,
good.
Tell us about it.
I mean,
don't give it all away.
No, I'm going to give it all away. So it's about this guy, I believe his name's George. Hopefully I don't mess that up. But, it's basically George. It starts off by like just him on the struggle. Like he's just struggling. Everything in life is just going wrong for him. He gets a flat tire. He's in a fight with his wife. He's miserable. He's got all these negative thoughts and he's got to take the bus. And on that bus, he meets this lady, Joy. And Joy is just full of energy and positivity and good vibes. And she teaches him how to get the energy bug, so to speak. And the whole book is basically about feeding positive energy to others and just being in the right state of mind. And it's definitely in my top 3 favorite books for sure. Even just remember earlier in this conversation, I talked about like having a conversation with my wife and just being like, we should be grateful for what we have. I don't know if that's something I normally would have said, honestly, but that book it just put me in a clearer, more positive mindset, honestly.
Yeah.
I almost feel like I need to just keep reading that book over and over again. I don't know.
Well, I read it once a year. And here's the thing that I love about the book too, is like you feel like you're reading a children's book. And the way
it's an easy read.
The way that they tell the story is so engaging, right? The way that they send the message.
Yeah.
And anyway, so looking to wrap this up, here's what I'm going to do. The first 5 people that'll email me directly the Energy Bus, I want to send a copy to. So anybody that's listening to this right now, in honor of our 50 episodes, email me, Stephen with a PH at t5insurance.com. Social media, whatever it is, subject line, the Energy Bus. I have extra copies because I send them out like hotcakes because I just love the message that it sends. So first 5 people, I'll send a copy directly to you. I want to do that in honor of our 50th episode. Taylor, thank you so much for being here. I can't think of anybody else in Sean and I circle to be on the 50th episode of the podcast here. And I like that we just kind of talked shop and jumped around, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Dude, thank you guys so much. Our friendship has been such a blast. And my wife thinks like we're like, she's like, who are these guys? I don't even know who they are, but I'm getting blown up at 2 a.m. from them. No, but realistically, thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be on the 50th episode, man. I love what you guys are doing. I listen to everyone. You guys are the consistency is amazing. You guys are doing awesome and you're pushing me to be better. So thank you.
And the joke that Taylor conveniently went over of what's so special about New York is that he's doing so
yes.
well with this garage page that he's getting a little too close to home for Steven and Sean. He's coming, hey, I got a lead in this town in New York. Where's that? It's getting a little too close to T5 and LAF. We're just saying.
That's a good point.
Everybody, before we wrap up again, that Telegram, please join the Telegram. Go to scratchagencypodcast.com. Hit join our Scratch community. We're not selling anything. It doesn't cost anything. Taylor's there. Sean's there. We got some great people. I think we're up to 15 people. Join the chat. It's a great time. But everybody, that is the 50th episode of the Scratch Agency Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Do us a favor, like the show, share the show, and subscribe. Most importantly, remember to dig down deep, believe in yourself, and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.